everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HQ Sportscast, your headquarters for all things sports. And today it'll be your headquarters for all things San Jose State football related. It's a big episode. This is our first roundtable we have. We have three guests on this episode today. If you guys want to introduce yourself one at a time, I know Hattie, he has been a previous guest during the Mountain West Media Day. But we have two new guests if you guys want to start us off.
Yeah, I'll go first. Vic Aquino. I've been writing with SB Nation since 2017, particularly covering San Jose State, football and basketball primarily. But yeah, it's been a good ride.
Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Nick Urias. Been covering San Jose State. Let's just go ahead and call it since 2021 with KSJS. Been doing some podcasting on the side as well. My own personal podcast with the Sports Sentiment, where we, just cover San Jose State football, basketball, and all things Mountain West. And glad to be part of you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have everyone here. We've been talking about this for quite some time now, so it's really cool to kind of see the season coming closer as we kick off against USC on August 29th at noon. And I think to start us off, we thought we might get the news today, but it has not been determined yet. The biggest topic of conversation is the three-way quarterback battle between Luke Weaver, Robert McDaniel, and Daniel Rolovich. I just wanted to get your guys' insights so far on how you think that's going, and how do you just overall evaluate each guy so far?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first if that's okay. I'm going through, obviously they're all young QBs, but I'm going through what I've seen of them tape, what I've seen them in depth at the spring game, and just, peripheral stuff during the practice since we're limited in what we can see. But Luke and Daniel, they look fairly close. They're both can kind of do it, everything kind of guys. Good arms, good strong arms. Robbie, I've seen a lot, particularly last year when he got into some garbage minutes there. Great arm. And if I were to rank them, if you were to ask me, I'd have to put Luke on top just from the brief experience he's had at Hawaii, which is just a handful of games. But Daniel, he has some really good pedigree with his dad, obviously, Nick Rolovich. So that to me amounts to something, but I haven't seen anything as of yet to say that that Daniel can do it. But if Daniel does or can start, he would have to be extraordinary in the eyes of Craig and Coach Ken. Robbie, I could see being up there too, but I kind of put him on a third at the ranking level at the moment. So that's kind of my quick take.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking to, I don't know, somebody I was talking to at the practice today, and I kind of like Luke Weaver's like the veteran guy, a little game experience, has been in some big moments playing against Cal in the bowl game. And then also I feel like Rolovich is the one that they're kind of grooming for the future. And I think Stutzman really likes just his understanding of the system from, his experience with his dad, in high school also just running a similar system. And then Robbie McDaniel, I feel like he's a guy that they're kind of like, figuring out in a way. I mean, he's played last year, but, he has the talent, and I feel like he's just kind of lost in the mix with those two guys.
Yeah.
I guess to add on to that, I would say I think Luke is also my number one guy right now. I think just based off his experience on the field. We saw what he did in Hawaii and that comeback he had against Cal, and I think that really kind of put him over the top. But I think Rolovich, it's definitely close right now with Rolovich out there. I think Robbie, as of right now, is out of the mix. I think, like you guys mentioned, we didn't really see much of him last year. We did see him in garbage time, and from what I remember, really, he still looked. He definitely didn't look ready, and I think to another year of maybe him taking over as that lead backup next year with Rolovich could be something interesting. But I would say also just Luke. I think fits in Coach Stutz's offense really well, and I think he's a guy that will move the ball downfield. And I think with all these new weapons, especially, that's what San Jose State wants.
Yeah, I'll just say, everyone's been pinpointing just the game-winning touchdown with Luke Weaver to versus Hawaii in the Hawaii Bowl. But he made some other starts. The competition wasn't great. Like Portland State was horrid in the FCS last year. Sam Houston State was a terrible pass defense. He got starts in those games. And then if you go back to week 1 last year, I mean, he played the back end of the second half for an injured Micah Alejado. So, you know, there's tape there that they most certainly the coaching staff went through during the recruitment process. The McDaniel tape, I mean, it's like what Vic said and what I mean, most of you guys said, like there's 3 games there, but there's really not much to, I guess, really take away from it because it was just what a 50 point deficit at Nevada and, you know, San Diego State's top ranked defense. So, you know, there's some stuff there. I'm kind of with Niles, like, hey, like Rolovich is a guy that he's a true freshman, guys. He's very young. So I could see where, you know, maybe they keep him in the pipeline, maybe for a year, let him learn, grow, things like that. It helps that McDaniel's been in the pipeline. So I do think him being around the team last year in the scheme, he certainly has that. You know, if I were to say my guess right now, it's probably going to be Weaver, but whoever the starter is, guys, I think ultimately if they're turning over the ball early on during the front half of the season, don't be shocked if there's a change.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you mentioned because during Walker Egan's time at quarterback, he was very up and down during the season. I know in the beginning, the course against Central Michigan, it was a rough start for him, but then when we had Stanford and when New Mexico State was down at SJSU Stadium, he was starting to get into a groove of things, but then eventually the second half of the season kind of took a downturn, and we eventually found out that he was dealing with a torn ACL the last couple of seasons, if I'm not mistaken. So it will definitely be interesting, and I think that the quarterback room will be more open this time around. Based on what I'm hearing, do you guys all collectively agree that Weaver is the best fit for Stutzman's spread and shred system? Or do you think that maybe one of these other guys might have the case that they can be better fit?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Luke. I'm going to pull out a 60s reference. I don't know if you heard the movie in the 60s. It was a big movie, Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. I mean, he was a rebel, but he was very calm, cool, and collected. And I definitely liked what Nick pointed out. Even in those, you know, so-called easy games, he reminded me of that sort of analogy from Paul Newman. But he was accurate with big guys in his face, especially Cal guys.
Yeah.
He was accurate and with a smile on his face, so to speak. And that kind of won me over. I'm obviously the Cal game was big, but even in those, you know, so-called easier games, he was flicking the ball with pretty good accuracy. So, I mean, that would be a tangible thing for me to add on based on what Nick just reminded me of there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just based off like just the football knowledge, I think he might be more of a gamer. Like when the bright lights come on, you know, he might be one of those guys that just reach another level. Because I mean, what I've heard from practice is basically like they're all kind of having their ups and downs, which is expected. You know, they're all like young and then also learning a new system for, you know, Rolovich and Weaver. So I just think he might be a little bit of a gamer, but I do expect just the way San Jose State football has gone the last couple of years, you know, multiple quarterbacks to start throughout the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think Luke is the best fit for Sutz's offense, and I think really right now what we're seeing, part of the reason on why they're taking this long to name a quarterback is I don't think Coach Ken and Coach Stutz want to run that 2 quarterback rotation again. I think if you just look at it for receivers, tight ends, running backs, I mean, learning 2 quarterbacks, learning 2 quarterback systems at the same time, really, it ruins the flow of the offense. And I think we kind of saw that with Emmett Brown and Walker Egan a couple of years ago. So I think definitely it looks like it's Luke, but they're taking all the time that they need just so they don't encounter that. But yeah, I do agree with what you said earlier, Nick and Niles, that it's going to be a short leash. If Luke turns the ball over twice in the first half, I wouldn't be surprised if boom, Coach Ken makes the switch right away. And Coach Ken's shown that he's not afraid to like bench any quarterback like we've seen like the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just to put a bow on all of this, I mean, I would just say don't be shocked if you see 2 quarterbacks in the USC game, especially if the game script gets out of control. So, I mean, whether if it's whoever you want to say is like, if they name a starter, they're going to name a starter before the week 0 game. but don't be shocked if you see the quote unquote QB2 out there, just to see how the evaluation process is, because we all know the USC game is going to be the toughest team they face all year. So I think that game as a whole is going to be very much an evaluation game for everybody. They're going to be looking at everything for 4 quarters. Because quite honestly, everybody needs rapport with all these portal teams now. So that's where I stand with that as well.
Yeah, I agree. If it gets out of hand early, I think they kind of will use it as a preseason game.
Yeah, that's also what I expect for the most part too. So we talk about the evaluation of quarterbacks, but I think another really, really big topic for San Jose State, and it's been a huge topic for the last 2 seasons now, is that wide receiver room. Now, for the past 2 seasons, you've had Nick Nash, who won the Triple Crown, was one of very few players to ever do it in NCAA football. And then you had followed up with Danny Scudero, who was still one of the top receivers in the nation in receiving yards. So now, with those guys departing, how do you think San Jose State's going to recover from that? Because last season, we had a lot of good receivers. You had Leland Smith in that mix, but we weren't sure if there was going to be clear-cut wide receiver. One guy eventually was Scudero. Do you think we're going to see that again, where there's going to be a bell cow, workhorse wide receiver, or do you think it's going to be a little bit more to distribute out targets for everyone?
I guess I'll go first again. I definitely see a bit more distribution based mainly with conversations with Mike Smith, the running back coach. He seems to be a clear indication he wants his backs to be a little more involved with touches, not just, obviously running touches, but pass catches out of the backfield. So if that's true, or even somewhat true, or more true than it was in previous years, that does kind of obviously spread the ball around. Just based on the spring game and looking at Jerry McClure's tape from UCLA, very, very brief stuff, but I really liked him a lot in terms of his taking space, his possession type receiver. Then you have Anthony Ivey, Jordan Anderson, I think, is the other transfer. So I don't see a huge separation except Jerry based on what I saw in spring. Carson Clark was this kind of dark horse freshman. I think I mentioned him on another show, but he reminds me of a Steve Smith from the Panthers, a really tough, gritty kind of receiver. And I don't think, like Coach Ken and Coach Stutz would be adverse to playing freshmen. So obviously within the limited time of what they can still do and still achieve redshirt. But Carson Clark has kind of always been this dark horse kind of guy, and I definitely see a higher amount of collective speed among the group. So I think that's good, and let's see what happens from there.
Yeah, and something that's kind of stood out for me is just I was talking to Jerry McClure, and I talked to Kama, one of the tight ends, and he said this year we're playing faster than they have before, and that to play fast you're going to need a lot of bodies coming in and out. So I think it's more of a rotation this year. I don't think it's going to be maybe like a top 3. Or that be what it became last season. With Leland Smith, Kyrie Scholes, James Scudero. I think it's going to become more of a wide receiver by committee. And then I remember Stutz said at the spring game in his press conference, he was like, "I'd rather have 3 or 4 guys go for 800 than one guy go for crazy numbers." So I think that's something that they're going to try to aim for moving forward.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with you guys. I really. As of right now, it's hard to say if there will be another Nick Nash or Danny Scudero breakout year. But I think you guys said it perfectly that there's 6 guys that really could get some really good minutes there. And one guy I'm high on though is Malachi Riley. I think obviously one of the returners in this room. His season was cut very short last year with that season-ending injury against Central Michigan. But I think just his experience, and I think really everything I've been hearing about camp from him, it does look like he's healthy, and it does look like he's willing to make that next big step there. Another guy that I heard a lot about in the beginning of camp was Cooper Hosch. Obviously a guy that we really didn't see much of last year. Most notably, he had that one catch against Texas, but after that, he was kind of with the 3 receivers that San Jose State already played. Like, he really wasn't in the mix there, but I think this receiver room is wide open, and he also very well could take that step. Another guy that I believe you mentioned, Vic, was Anthony Ivey. I actually talked to Coach Ken on Saturday, and this is something interesting that Anthony Ivey will actually be handling punt returns, which is definitely interesting because I definitely had him higher on the mix, especially coming from a bigger school like Penn State. So it's going to be interesting if that means he's maybe lower in the depth chart, or they just think his ability on the punt returns is what the team needs. But yeah, that's going to be interesting there for sure.
Yeah, this wide receiver room has got a lot of depth, but it's unproven depth, right?
Mhm.
All these guys come from places where, power fours, power fives, and just rotted on the bench. And they come to SJSU, and it's, they were high priced guys. Obviously, they wouldn't have gotten power four recruits or, offers if it weren't, if they weren't talented. They just never got the opportunity. So I mean, there's like 5 guys in this room with that. I mean, your most proven guy is Jordan Anderson, who had 24 catches for 361 yards at Sac State last year. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. Just in that regard, I'm kind of on board with Hattie. Like, hey, people have kind of forgotten about Malachi Riley. I mean, we saw him for a quarter versus Central Michigan last year, and he was a guy that was playing the slot. When you go back and look at the week 1 stuff versus CMU, which I find to be pretty intriguing there. So I do think it is going to be more spread out this year. And quite honestly, I think anybody that's rooting for this team this year would much rather take a much more balanced and efficient attack in the red zone and being a little bit more unpredictable than just being, like a Danny Scudero, where it was, a lot of stats, but at the same time, a lot of empty calories when it came to, wins and just overall, efficiency with points. So we'll see how it plays out. And also, don't forget about Tama Amasone. The coaches have kind of said, like, hey, we're not going to let this guy sit on the bench. I don't know where he's going to ultimately stand in the wide receiver room because there's, like we said, there's like 7 dudes here. But, I mean, there's going to be a package or two or, a wrinkle by Coach Stutzman. We all know Coach Stutzman's pretty creative with the packages he rolls out. So I wouldn't rule out Tama Amasone for a breakout game or a breakout collection of plays throughout the year either.
Yeah, I think he'll at least throw a touchdown this year. I think Stutz will draw that up.
Yeah, and then Dominic McKenzie as well. I'm not sure if we mentioned him. Also another guy that Coach did say he's going to be handling kickoff returns. So it looks like overall special teams, which I'm sure we'll get into more later, is pretty set for Coach.
Yeah, I like what Nick points out because that's something that I didn't think about until you mentioned it. Is I think that it's going to be a challenge for San Jose State to figure out how to utilize all these guys who don't have a ton of experience. But I think that can benefit them as well when it comes to opposing defenses. Because it might be harder to script against how to stop San Jose State's offense if they can figure it out properly. Because, like you mentioned, last year our offense really ran on Scudero for the most part, and there was other guys that contributed. But if you took out Scudero, there was really no offense with the Spartans. And same thing with Nick Nash. If you took Nick Nash out of the offense, where is that production going to come from for the most part? So I think that is going to be a nice change of scenery for San Jose State, but it's going to be a harder challenge. And I think it's going to be the biggest test on Kenyo Matalo's on his 3rd year as San Jose State's head coach. So I'm very, very curious on how that is going to pan out. I think special teams, I'll jump to that since you mentioned it, Hattie. There was a lot of problems with this team last year. There, almost every aspect of the ball, you could point out multiple things, but the first red flag that we really caught for the season was special teams. Obviously, Dennis Lynch was a big name that got tossed around. He eventually got cut, him and Matthias Brown. It was a serious, serious struggle. So how important do you guys think that they made sure that the special teams would be a lot better? How much do you think that they emphasized on that improving this season? And how much do you think it'll improve?
Yeah, obviously, to me, the obvious name is Tristan Sinatra. I knew him since he was a little baby, practically. I can't say he remembers me, but I remember I worked for his parents. So he definitely has some football at a lower level, sort of football pedigree in himself. So he's very, very competitive guy, kind of a natural inboard kind of guy in terms of anything he did. So that whole family, Sinatra family, is like super athletic. So he definitely, I can see it in him in his eyes. So I haven't talked to him yet, but I'm gonna personally wait until maybe after the USC game. But what I see in him is a power leg, and you kind of need that power leg so you can not change your approach, your technique through like a 20-yard kick to a 50-yard kick. There's a lot of similarities. The technique needs to be the same, but the power leg is kind of like that common denominator where you can just throttle up, throttle down. I'm not going to be all technical, but I've seen enough kickers to ask, what is their differentiator and what makes them so confident, and it's just having a obviously strong leg. So a 20-yard will look like a 50-yarder. I see that in Tristan, and he's proven that at Idaho. So that's probably the first and foremost, because we gave up so many points and obviously games from the kicking game that, obviously we're going to have probably 3 more wins in a bowl season there. So that's first and foremost. From there, that's the main thing that stuck out to me. And the return game, that was lacking. I'm not sure. I think I forgot how you rank that, but definitely at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of what they produced in terms of, the punt return game. And kick return game. So that's kind of what first and foremost is on my mind. But I'm sure, Niles, you have a ton on your mind, I can see.
Yeah. It's just, I feel like last season when you talk about it, it's more of, like as you said, they could have won 3 games and make it like a bowl season if they make field goals. But I feel like another thing that kind of gets pushed under the rug when you talk about, the special teams is their punt coverage and their kickoff coverage wasn't good either.
Yeah.
And I think the coach they brought in, Fred DiNucci, he's been there, and he's been I've heard you talk about in your last podcast. You've covered the team for a while, Vic. So, and you were saying he's helped fix special teams at SJSU and Stanford also over and over and over again. So I think that's his 3rd time being back here.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he's gonna have a big, play a big factor in what the special teams is this year. I think it'll be much improved as a group.
Yeah. Real quick with Fred, when he was here, those were never like issues, like special teams as a whole, maybe little quirky things like that, but he kept it solid. And if you didn't bring it up, it's like you forgot he was doing a good job. So he was kind of like a forgotten man, but until he left, so there's a lot of confidence and a lot of expectations for Fred to beef up that whole special teams unit. I honestly think he will, for sure, just based on his track record.
Yeah, and I guess to add on to that, everything I've been hearing from Coach Ken just throughout the season is all the players and coaching staff, they've really been praising Sinatra, and they really do believe that he is the guy that will kind of transport that kicking room, because obviously you guys mentioned that was a big story last year. And Sinatra, he definitely, from what we've been hearing and seeing in practice, looks good in practice. It's just about obviously how will it translate to games, right? But you obviously still have Matthias Brown out there. One thing with him is he's going to be handling the kickoffs too. So looks like Coach Ken still, using him out there in that special teams unit, but Sinatra will be handling field goals. No more having kickers, one from the right hash, one from the left hash. That was definitely another story of last year, right? But so I think crazy. Definitely. And then also one guy too that shouldn't be forgotten is Trent, punter, who I believe, if we remember correctly, last year, ranked one of the toppest in the Mountain West. Really, I think just has always been an efficient guy at that unit. And I think definitely with these additions, I think definitely the special teams should really transform here to be something that definitely doesn't lose you games like last year.
Yeah.
I've said this a couple times, guys. I've probably to all of you guys, and at some point during the off season, but this was Sinatra. This was the number 1 get for the Spartans in the off season. And actually, I don't know if I told all you guys this, and maybe the audience might know just from what I've said. But they missed out on their kicker last year. Dennis Lynch was not a part of the original plan, according to Coach Ken, what he told me at Media Day. And they kind of had a pivot, and, they just got outbid at kicker. And that's why they went out. They got Sinatra before Luke Weaver, if you guys recall as well. So this is obviously if like you guys said, this set between Central Michigan, at Wyoming, and at Utah State last year. If you hit those kicks, you're winning those games.
Yeah.
So, look, that's 6 wins, and who knows what else happens in between all of that and between game flow. But what I want to mention, guys, let's just say Sinatra is what everyone makes him out to be. Let's just say he comes out and he's hitting 40, 50 yarders. What does that do from a play calling standpoint from Craig Stutzman in these games? Because all of a sudden, Stutzman, we know, guys, is very aggressive. And there were times last year where the kicking game was so non-existent, it'd be 4th and 8 from, the opponent 30-yard line, and they're going. And I just think if Sinatra can hit from 40 plus at a high rate, and the kicking game is, exponentially better from last year, maybe this Craig Stutzman offense is not as aggressive on their 3rd downs and 4th downs for that matter, just because of, what Sinatra brings with his leg. And maybe that's more of a conservative approach. I know the fans are not the biggest fan of Stutzman's play calling when it's like 2nd and 1 and they're airing it out. Yeah. But that's something to keep in mind. If Sinatra's really the high prize guys that the coaches believe he is, and, it ultimately reflects on the field, just keep that in mind as we go through, these games on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think that was well said, Nick. I'm gonna make this really quick, but I think when you go to those just 4th and short situations, 4th and not even 4th and short, you go 4th and medium. It's really again after last year. I mean, you don't blame them for not wanting to take the kick and wanting to go for it. But I think definitely that will change the play calling, and I think you'll kind of see that just trust. You'll just kind of see that trust more in that kicking game.
Yeah, he hit a 56-yarder at New Mexico last year. So, like Vic said, he's got the leg.
Yeah, and combined with Coach Fred, that adds such another, how thick, but another layer of confidence that he's going to really, really support and kind of coach up, Tristan. So I feel very, very confident in that part of the factoring.
I think they for sure at least have a fix for the unit right now. I think it's just, you never know until it hits the field, and, but they for sure have a fix for the unit right now.
Right. Yeah, he was 12 of 18 last year for Idaho State. But it really does look like over the offseason, I mean, it really does look like he's just growing as a kicker.
Yeah, I think that Nick mentions a really good point, because I think a big question that all of us collectively have might be, is the offense going to look different with a lot of undetermined players at quarterback and wide receiver? Are we going to take as many fireworks as we might have had the last 2 seasons? And I think that a conservative approach can be a very doable situation if Sinatra proves himself to be as good of a kicker as they talk about him to be. And I really think that that's going to send the San Jose State team to another dimension, because you can point all the fingers. There was something wrong with that team on all 3 sides of the ball. Like, there's no denying it. But with that being said, they were still competitive enough that they could have made a bowl game, with the exception of 4 games. Because I think Stanford too, Dennis Lynch had missed, I think, a couple of field goals that were under 35 yards. And if he makes those, they win that game on the road too. So as poorly the season went last year, and with the offense having its struggles and the defense having its fair share of struggles, if that special teams wasn't as discombobulated as they were, that San Jose State team would have a much more successful season on paper than eventually they had for that season. I want to go to the defense, because that is probably not the biggest maybe topic of conversation for people, because the offense is always the main thing that people talk about. However, Bojai does come in the second half of last season, but now he's going to be the defensive coordinator. He's got the full go for this season. And what do you expect from him and this defense for this season?
I expect a lot more than ever before, only because there's such a reputation with the Spartan defense. I mean, linebackers is one thing. They were kind of known as maybe a linebacker junior U. So with an Ethan Powell, with a Nasre Danielson, Isaac Mahuka, I'm sure you guys have heard of the stuff he's been doing out there. So at that core, I feel really good about. And linebackers have always been, at the very least, relatively solid. Defensive line, let me back up a quick second. So, I mean, if you look at what they did in 2024, I think 90 plus tackles for losses, 23, 24 INTs. So, and then 2025, obviously the bottom dropped out. And a lot of that was obviously on a secondary that was pretty discombobulated, and a defensive line that was not getting really any kind of penetration. With Coach Bojay changing the scheme in a sense, if you remember, Coach Odom was more in the 4-3, 3-4, but it was kind of a morphing defense. Coach Bojay did and does learned everything in terms of a defensive coordinator from Coach Odom. But there is variations of how he runs a lot more of an aggressive scheme. Same amount of rotations and everything, but like Solomon Alongi, he's the nose tackle. He's expected to make a lot of noise and at least take a lot of space up in the middle. The scheme up front is pretty important. Secondary, I think, how do you pointed out, there's some really good, strong transfers in there. That's with size too. That's some 6'3", 6'4" safeties and corners. So I really expect, at the very least, that defense can come up to par average, where you can do your part for the Spartans to get into a bowl game, get playoff eligible, et cetera, et cetera. So much on this defense. If they can just get up to average, they can do a lot. So I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure there's a lot of holes for you guys to add into that.
Yeah, a big point of emphasis for me is the defensive line. Just because last year I think we were towards the bottom of the Mountain West in just sacks and pressure, and then a lot of quarterbacks and even running backs had all day to either find holes or make passes. And then on the secondary, I feel like the linebacker unit is fine until they show us it's not fine, because they've shown they can get proven linebackers year in and year out. But the secondary for me is forcing turnovers. Last year, it's another thing that they struggled with is getting interceptions. I remember there was one game, Jalen Banner against New Mexico, I believe, at home. He had 2 interceptions, and those are like the only game I can remember us, getting actual interceptions. Or there might have been a few, but that was like the only ones that stick out in my head. But so for me, for the secondary, is forcing turnovers. And I think just with the additions and how seriously they've been taking it, I think that's something very doable with this head coach, Brian Norwood, Joe Dale. I think the secondary will look a lot different than it has in the past, with just more aggressive looks out there.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think forcing turnovers, I think that really was a big story last year that they weren't able to do. But I think, again, you get more sacks, pile up the fumbles, secondary gets the interceptions. And I think really, again, it takes that defense to the next level. And I think with Bojay, I mean, kind of the same thing I said with Trajan, is that really coaches and players have really been praising Bojay and just working with him on the field and also off the field. And I think that really is we're going to see a different look to that defense. And I think the defensive line, I think, again, too, I'm interested to see how it does against the run game. Obviously, we saw last year Central Michigan, being a MAC team like they are, just really abusing the run game there. So I think week 2, or technically that would be the week 1 game against Eastern Michigan, that definitely will be a big test to see how they play against that run game. And I think definitely just based on how the defensive line has looked over the offseason, it's definitely promising that it could make a bigger impact in that run game, especially.
Yeah, guys, I was really worried about the secondary last year, just heading into week 1 for CMU. Especially when they announced Jalen Thomas as a starter. He's no longer with the program. He's at Wazoo now. But like they were starting essentially a true freshman out there on the opposite side to Jalen Boehner, and Thomas showed some flashes, and then by like week 4 it all fizzled out. And I'm a little bit more confident this year in that area. They bring in Brian Dukes at safety. He's a 4-year guy at Cal Poly. He's got some experience. I said, like, hey, he's going to be out there playing hungry and with his hair on fire. It's his last year of eligibility, so we think. Isaiah Buxton, at corner, played 9 games for the San Diego State, one of the top units defensively in all of America last year. He didn't really start because Chris Johnson was a first-round pick last year, but I really like what he could potentially bring to the table. My guess is that he's going to be starting at one of those spots. Keywan Bullard is another name to throw out there. I think he's been here for like 4 years now, and he's been kind of just waiting his turn in that DB room. And Malachi Crawford too is a name to circle just because he's long, lengthy. He's like 6'4". He stands out when you see him practice, guys. And remember, he was a late spring arrival last year, and everyone's like, okay, like San Jose State's getting this power 4 guy. How is he gonna really impact things if he does at all? And he never saw the field. So I'm thinking another year here, maybe he's worth a depth piece. So I feel good about the secondary. The linebackers are always good. I do think Nas Danielson's due for, like, he's been another guy. He's been waiting his turn. I think he's due for a breakout year. The thing that worries me, guys, and I think everyone's going to go out and pick on it early, is the run defense. There's a lot of really good run-based teams that on the schedule this year. I think USC is going to come out here and pound it. Eastern Michigan's run heavy. Wyoming, I think, will be run heavy. Northern Illinois, we obviously know Air Force with the triple option. Like, there's a lot of teams out here that run it well in the Mountain West, and I think that's something that they'll pick on, immediately. And it's going to be up to Bojay's defense to stop it. And that's what worries me right now heading into week 0, week 1. Because there's some swing games on this schedule where if you start out 1-3, when the run defense is not so good, things can spiral quickly. So that's what I'll be paying attention to early on in the year.
I think you tossed around a bunch of names right now on who can be some breakout candidates. For the rest of you guys, if you chose one player on the defense to keep an eye out for fans or just anyone that's going to be watching San Jose State football, who is someone that they might not be familiar with right now, but they will be in a couple of months down the road?
I'll go with my first instinct only because I've seen him as a receiver. He's a converted receiver to safety, Tuli Tagovailoa. So I've heard a couple of players call him like the Troy Polamalu. I'm sure you guys all know who he is, the safety Hall of Famer for Pittsburgh Steelers. But he's like the internal player's player. So as a safety, I would say out of curiosity too, to keep an eye on Tuli.
Yeah, for me, I would say Nas Danielson. I've talked to him a couple of times just during the off season, and he seems very confident in what he's going to do, and then also how he's going to lead the defense at linebacker. Him and Ethan Powell, I feel like they're not gonna do much. It's not gonna be a big gap from what they're missing last year with Latu and then Jordan Pollard. And I think they have their own flair and they have their own playing style. So I would go Nas Danielson.
Yeah, actually, was talking to all the coaches too. They were talking about Tuli's transition, and yeah, I think he's definitely going to make a big impact there. And I think, looking at it now, especially with how deep the receiver room is, I think that's a good thing for him to definitely make that bigger impact. Another player that kind of up on the air on what impact he'll make is Justin Stearns. Only reason I'm mentioning him is obviously coming now for his 5th season here on the Spartans, really one of the vet guys. But I think with that veteran presence there, he could definitely make a difference. I'm looking at his stats here last year, 25 total tackles, had half a sack. So really the production wasn't there. But I think, again, with this new defense, I think definitely his vet presence there could really make a difference and especially make an impact there.
Yeah, I briefly touched on it, but Nas Danielson, I think he could essentially be Jordan Pollard's a tough guy to replace, but I think from a number standpoint, I think he could be your tackling machine this year. And then I don't know, there's something about this Buxton guy where he's confident and he's succeeded in a scheme at San Diego State, and teams are going to try to go probably pick on those DBs, and I think Buxton might be able to hold his ground, and he's got experience too. I think that's what matters too. There's a lot of inexperienced guys on this entire team this year, and I think Buxton coming over from SJSU, familiar with the Mountain West teams, I think will help him.
Yeah, a lot of new names, a completely different team, which I think is the beauty about the season, is that the expectations are far low. I think for the most part, if I'm not wrong, I think a lot of us will collectively agree that last season, the expectations were pretty darn high for the San Jose State team. after the relative success they had in 2024. We may thought that can transition to more success in 2025, but obviously it became a huge stud. So they're under the radar. There's not as much pressure on them potentially as it was last season, but anyone is eligible for a bowl game at this time. How do you think San Jose State can go back to being a bowl eligible football team?
Defense. If I made the safe assumption that the offense is going to be, again, at least average, I know they'll do a lot better than that. But if defense can come up anywhere close to they were in 2024, that's as a whole kind of the main ingredient to make them competitive. So I'm putting the bowl game or the bowl eligibility as sort of the baseline. So yeah, I think anything and everything defense. If they can do that, the old adage, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I'm agree. I would have to say, just going with the proven commodities, Coach Stutz, has proven to put points on the board on the offensive side of the ball. So the only thing you could aim at is the defense, stepping up and just being good enough to when you get in those shootout situations, just to be the team that's not losing at the end of the day. So. And SJSU, the way this schedule comes out is a little different. I feel like there's gonna be less shootouts than there is, previously, especially last year. But when they get in those situations against those run-heavy teams, those Wyomings, those Air Forces, those North Dakotas, you need to be physical. You need to be, ready for a long day. And it's just, I feel like mentally, Boj and the team's identity right now seems like they're ready and they're up for it. But it's just up to, we're a week out for the season. It's just put it up on the field, put the, mentality on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think definitely. I mean, we kind of touched on it earlier that really last year they were 3 kicks away from making a bowl game. And if all is right with Sinatra and if he's the guy that really is who the coaches have been talking about, I really think, again, that gets you 3 extra wins. That gets you 6 wins. That gets you a bowl game spot. And I think the team really has a talent too. They have the coaching too. I think it's just a matter of, kind of what you touched on, Niles. That's how they take care of those late game situations, especially if they aren't shootouts, how they take care of those, maybe 2017 type games, really. But yeah, I think definitely a bowl game. I think especially for SJSU standards, I mean, we saw besides last year, how they made 3 straight bowl games, longest streak in the program's history. And I think definitely they're capable of going back to that caliber.
I'll say this: quarterback, whoever the quarterback is and is for the healthy portion of the season, can't turn over the football. I've mentioned that already. And then the run defense, just I think overall, has to improve. That's something everybody's going to neutralize, as I mentioned. So I think if you combine those 2 things with an improved special teams unit from just kicking field goals, I mean, this could be a 6 to 7 win team. And I know public perception kind of thinks this is kind of a 3-win team this year. I'm not going to go that crazy that the ceiling, the floor is that low, because this team is they're still talented. And I think you still got to really trust Coach Ken and Craig Stutzman. That last year was just ultimately an outlier year when you kind of look at these guys' resume from top to bottom. But there's a lot of swing games on here, guys. This can get hairy early and they turn it around, or they can start out fast and, maybe they just continue, to go off with it. And I'm intrigued to see where it goes, because they're the only team in America this year that plays 13 games on the schedule this year. So, they got this extra game on there, and there's some interesting spots and some new destinations, as we know, in the Mountain West.
Yeah, I think that's the optimism of this season, just because, we'll have one of the highest transfer, portal rates in the college football this season. So, it could either go really bad, or they could find guys in the portal, and they can replace, weaknesses last season, and it can turn out good. So it's hard to predict this year. Just covering it, it's hard to predict.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with all of us as, beat writers and, specifically on San Jose State, of course, when you look at that, I mean, we're always like the cautious optimists, so I'm going to say it can't be any worse than it was last year. And you look across the board, kicking, secondary, even QBs. I mean, you have young, vibrant QBs. And under Craig Stutzman, I feel pretty confident he'll groom them correctly. I do see the back half of the schedule, with I think UNLV and Air Force, even North Dakota State, but especially New Mexico. If like halfway through the season, a lot of teams get enough tape on us, and vice versa. But if you kind of correlate that to when Walker got hurt, and also maybe defense is kind of figuring us out a little bit, or that one-dimensional Scudero, maybe if we can neutralize him, we can kind of neutralize offense just enough. We can take advantage of the defense. So as teams, as it progresses, you get a lot of those other dynamics, which is in the scheme and how they're game planning. Those intangibles are obviously just important to what's happening behind the scenes. But yeah, just to kind of throw that in there, because I like what you think, Nick. You're thinking always holistically, so it kind of good that we get together, because it kind of rattles my brain in other areas I'm not thinking about. So
then the closeout the episode for good. What is your guys' record prediction for this team? I know you said it's really hard to point your finger across on how the season's going to go, but what's your record prediction, and how do you think they're going to make a bowl game this year?
I can lead things off here. I have this team around 6 wins. You can argue 7, if it goes out well. But again, like, it can also spiral out to 4 wins, and we kind of wouldn't be surprised by it. What's intriguing about the Mountain West guys, when you kind of go up and down, everybody's got ownage on each other, right? Like, San Jose State's awesome versus New Mexico historically, but when they go to Reno, they haven't won there in a quarter century. Eastern Michigan, like, is a coin flip game. When Wyoming goes on the road, you can't really trust them. So, I could pinpoint some things here. And, you throw in the newcomers here. How do they adjust? Where there might be some advantages and disadvantages when you kind of look at things on paper. To me, the biggest swing game on the schedule is, a game, that week 1 game versus Eastern Michigan. And it's a really tough spot, guys, because it's 6 days with travel, coming off a physical game we imagine versus USC. And then, what does that rivalry game with Fresno look like? They're going to be very run heavy. And we all know Coach Ken has his way to an extent. We all know with Hawaii, right? He's going to come ready for that game with the whole staff. So I kind of look at things that way from that perspective, and I kind of see 6 wins. And I just see ultimately as well the 1-score game luck improving for SJSU this year in that regard. With the Sinatra edition, and I'll ultimately say 6 wins, and you could go ahead and, pinpoint the bowl win, bowl eligibility. And I think overall that would be a successful season for this team, just given where the preseason mark is. But I know for SJSU fans, just the noise that you see and, amongst the fan base here, they need a bounce back season, because I think, I don't want to say like the jury is out, but there's like some frustration amongst the fan base from just the chatter that I hear, that like Coach Ken and Craig Stutzman, like they got to get this thing together, and they kind of got to improve. So I say 6 wins when it's all said and done. That's my long answer to the question, Lucas.
Yeah. I guess I'll add on to that. I'm gonna go with you. I think 6, maybe 7. I think again, I think looking at the schedule, starting off with USC, I think it could be a safe bet to say 0-1, right? But then Eastern Michigan, I think that's a really favorable matchup. Obviously you mentioned not an easy place to play at, especially with the time travel, with only 5-6 days to prepare. But I think if you go 1-1 going into Cal Poly, I think you should feel pretty good. Looking at these games, I think there's going to be that one game that, SJSU struggles that, they should win. looking at the Nevada, the Air Force, we saw how those games that they were supposed to win ended up last year, right? And again, I think really one thing is they got to take advantage of those games because once you get to the UNLVs, the NDSU, the New Mexico, the Hawaiis, those games, you're not going to have much room to make mistakes, right? You're not going to have much room there. I think Hawaii is an interesting one too. Obviously, the time change. It's going to be 6 p.m. local time. They're 9 p.m. San Jose time. So I think that's really going to be interesting to see how kind of fatigue plays a part there. But yeah, I think Fresno State, I think that's another game too. Obviously, classic rivalry game there. Really, I think that's going to be a close game as if they will win. I really think, I don't know. It's hard to say right now. Like, I think that's a game that they definitely could win. Obviously, you never know in these rivalry games, but I think if you stay in that game, I think you definitely feel pretty good going into Hawaii for sure. So yeah, once again, I think a bowl game is a successful season, no matter if it's 6 or 7 wins.
Yeah, I wish I can give you guys a different answers, but I'm around 6 or 7 wins too. I just think if SJSU can handle that middle of the schedule after Hawaii, they have Wyoming, they have, I think it's NIU, they have Wyoming, UTEP, and then Nevada. I think they can handle those 3 games against teams, favorable matchups. Even though Wyoming can run the ball, Nevada has a good record against us, playing at 3rd place. It's just you need to take advantage of those wins because after that it gets a little bleaker and it gets a little harder to win games. And you also got to take into the mental component because because that's something I feel like we saw last year is the team's confidence just got shot once they just kept on losing those close games. So I feel like the mental aspect of it is going to play a role as much as just how it's going to go on the field. And I feel like 6 or 7 wins, if they take care of that middle of the schedule, those games where they play in favorable matchups, then they should have a bowl game or be close to a bowl game.
Yeah, I think just to add on, just make this really good. But UTEP is also again really interesting place to play. Obviously, at the Sun Bowl, that's again, I think that's just another atmosphere there that really, I think if we're looking at the schedule and where they're playing this year, like they're going to be playing in some interesting atmospheres. And just going back to the whole QB kicking situation is really going to be interesting just how they handle the pressure in those atmospheres.
Vic, you're muted.
You're muted, Vic. He's still muted.
Hold on. Let's see if I can unmute his mic on my side.
Lucas, what do you got for us? What's your prediction?
For you, I think it's so make or break for the team, to be honest with you. I really don't know like a legitimate answer. I think I might go a game lower just because I'm not going to try to be as optimistic as I was last season because I really thought last season they had a favorable schedule before everything went down. I thought that it could be a 7 to 8 win season, and that was not the result later on. So right now I'm going to be a little bit not as optimistic. I'll say maybe 5 wins, 6 max. I really think that this season it's going to put Coach Ken and Stutz on the hot table. I know it's only been Ken's 3rd season as head coach at San Jose State, but at the same time, people here, or the fans here at least, they're starting to get a little bit impatient, especially how last season went. So I think that there's a big test on the way for this whole coaching staff on how are they going to bounce back from last season. It's going to be a big challenge with so many new faces, and that's what makes me so unsure about how this team is going to pan out. I think what Niles said, with all these transfer guys coming in, it's really going to – the guys can be great, and it could be a fantastic season for San Jose State, or it might not just work out after all, and it could be a 4 to 5 win season. So I think everything is up to grabs, but I think people are kind of putting San Jose State on the radar a lot less this season, which I think is a good thing for this team, is that there might not be as much pressure as there was in previous seasons. But at the same time, I'm not going to get too excited on the team just because there's so much undetermination right now. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be. We don't know who the wide receivers are going to be starting right now. So it's all up for grabs. But I do hope that the team does get itself together, because I think there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of promise on this team. And potentially there's a lot more promise on this squad than the last one, just because there's so many more guys that can be utilized in so many different ways.
All right, Vic, is your mic working?
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. I heard a lot of things there, and I think you probably covered most things I would say. Obviously, newness is with the coaches as well. Coach Dale, Coach Bojay, first year DC, Coach Norwood, Coach Smith. So these unknowns are, if you look at the flip side, these other teams that they're facing have also these unknowns. There's no tape on this collective group. So at least for the first half of the season, they can swing it to their advantage. But I'm going to push out to 7 wins still, maybe 8, but I'll just say 7. I still favor what the coaches need to do, because I think they're on the hot seat as much as, the players. I mean, so Nick, I know you mentioned you speak to some of the fan base. I've been exposed a little bit to the administration, and during the basketball season, we're talking basketball. They're talking football. Because, yeah, that's nice, but football, that they need to win.
Yep.
So that says a lot to me right there. So.
Yeah, me and Hattie talked to Jeff Coney, as San Jose State athletic director, yesterday, Friday or Saturday, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he, again, is like, they need to win. Basketball sets the table for not basketball. Football sets the table for San Jose State athletics. So if football can have a good season, they feel like, that can push momentum, money, and all that type of things, towards San Jose State athletics. So it's going to be a big year.
Yeah, I would just say, like, yeah, football, we're in this whole revenue share this model now, where it's like football and basketball are like pretty much the kingpins of this thing. So if you're not delivering in those sports, that's no shame to like the Olympic sports, because those are important too. And we need, like, I think everybody needs to still keep those, teams on the radar. But let's just be honest, like football and basketball and, for some institutions to an extent, baseball, is in there as well, where if you're not delivering, then, there's just more pressure when it comes to that. And, Vic, Niles, Hattie, I know you guys were all at Media Day, but, you guys talk to players and coaches. People believe, like, when you talk to the coaches in particular, at least when I had the conversations with them, everyone thought that was kind of just an outlier year for San Jose State. Like, when you talk about San Jose State and when you hear, okay, we're going to game plan for San Jose State, they talk about how unique the game plan is when they go up against the Spartans. And everybody has respect for Coach Ken and Craig Stutzman for what they do and how they scheme things up and how they just prepare. So I think that everyone may be thinking, wow, like this panel's pretty optimistic. But I think we're going based off of, just last year. I think ultimately was a wash of a year, and they kind of threw in the towel the last 4 weeks. And this year, it's brand new, it's fresh, and everybody's playing with a little bit more hunger. I mean, we heard Coach Ken, he's like, I'm still pissed off over last year.
Yep.
And I think that goes into, everybody kind of hitting the reset button and hitting the ground running here.
Yep. And yeah, just picking off, when we talked to Jeff Coney, it's just this season, there's a sense of urgency with this season. And I feel like urgency, pressure creates diamonds. So I think has something, something positive for SJSU to build off is just the pressure from everybody that's to have this successful season that's, coming up, that they're trying to have coming up.
Yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting season to say the least. I think we're all pretty fired up about it. There's a lot to look at this season, and I think that's what makes it such an exciting season. As who knows how this team will look like in a couple of weeks down the road. But only time can tell. I just want to thank all of our guests coming in here. I'll do a little silent applause so the audio doesn't get chopped up for Vic, Nick, and Hattie for hopping on for a great episode. And you might see these guys in future episodes. I think me and Niles have touched upon it. Yeah. As soon as football season starts for San Jose State, that's going to become a much bigger topic of conversation on this podcast for the next couple of months. But as what Niles just put, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to follow us on our socials. Thank you guys for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you guys for having us again.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for
We
having us.
really appreciate it for your time. It was a great episode.
Okay.
I'm really happy with that.